Hi again, everyone. Try to do this one faster, but even these two small words are going to take a little bit of time to get through, but we can do it. Well, let's start off by saying, well, what is da? And you would have had to watch the last episode to know what this is. Well, this was a connector, and it was post-positive. What did that mean? Post-positive meant this was from pono, the Latin verb to place, to put. So post-positive meant placed after. And we could do this in a sentence by saying, I sacrificed to the goddess, and the goddess, he dethea. So, let me go ahead and write that all out. So, ethusa te thea. I sacrificed to the goddess. It's written somewhat tortuously, but all right, so that's the background. And now we want to say, and the goddess, maybe she sent gifts. Dora Pempsen. Epipsen. Good. So, and the goddess sent gifts. This is what we now have as our... I didn't see the sentence going this way, but this is how it went. I sacrificed to the goddess, and the goddess sent gifts. Great. In Latin, this was the whole principle of ancient religion, and the Latin for this was do ut des. I give in order that you may give. So I sacrifice to you in order that you may kind of bring some good things my way. That's the essence behind this whole expression. So I sacrifice to the goddess, and the goddess sent gifts. This and is post-positive. It's in position 2, following position 1. When I say position, I don't mean accent, I just mean kind of in the sentence. It's the second word in the sentence, following the first word in the sentence. That's what it means to be post-positive. But then in English, we don't have post-positive conjunctions. We have to put that and first. So I sacrificed to the goddess, and the goddess sent gifts. Well, good. That's de in a nutshell, and that's also the type of conjunction that men is. It is post-positive, or it's a post-positive particle. But its meaning is going to be a little bit more different. So what did we say de could mean? It could mean and or but, and both of those were fairly neutral. Men were going to translate, and this is mouthful, and it's a terrible thing to always translate men's this way, but we should try it. And it's on the one hand. What we're really kind of developing is a scale system, right? We got a scale down here. We got our two little trays, and we're saying, well, weighing it on the one hand, whatever's going on here, this is exerting a force, but on the other hand, there's this kind of force in the other direction. We're comparing similar things again, but they're in this kind of oppositional nature. And men, which we can often not translate, is setting up the Greek reader or Greek listener to expect a de to come down the line, and to expect that whatever is going to be here, maybe what we call this, lever or plate A, to be somehow opposed to what's going on plate B. So let's see this in example. And again, remember that these connectors connect equals. Those could be nouns, those could be verbs, those could be phrases, or even now that we're at this stage in Greek, adjectives. The dog was, on the one hand, brown and black. That sort of thing. That's one way that we could connect the adjectives, those color adjectives. All right, well, let's do the examples that Shelmerdine is bringing up because I think they're pretty good ones. So it is easy to speak, but difficult to persuade. So it is easy to speak, and this is on page 42. Speak, but difficult to persuade. Nice kind of philosophical point there, isn't it? That's why I like this sentence. I like it when it brings up good examples rather than my stupid always sacrificing to the goddess. But we find our hobby horses and we get used to them. I personally like sacrificing to the goddess, but that's neither here nor there. Let's go. It is easy to speak, but difficult to persuade. So easy, well, what's that in Greek? That's radios. Remember that always is rough breathing over an initial row. And then that also has a subscript there. Radios is our nominative, but then we need to say to speak, which is legein. Nice infinitive, but what gender is that infinitive? Well, that's neuter singular. So this can't be radios, this has to be what? Radion. So radion, and then it is to speak. Well, we gotta do a lot here. Let's set up this opposition first, because what we're saying is, really, on the one hand, that will, for now, every time I write OT, OH means on the one hand. So this is implied here. On the one hand, it's easy to speak, but it's difficult to persuade. We could imagine putting this back on the scales and saying, well, here's speaking, here's persuading, and those are in opposite forces in this notion of the sentence. So then we have men, and then we have our verb, which we're going to need this enclitic st, which actually changes this, what I was anticipating to be a grave, to be acute. So radion men st, legein. So literally going word by word. Easy, on the one hand, it is to speak. And then we want to say difficult, which is what? Kalepos in the nominative masculine singular. But then again, it's going to be neuter because we're dealing with a infinitive. So kalepon. And then we'll make that cute for right now. De. All right, and then here's our postpositive connection. And, or in this case, but. So easy to speak, but difficult to what? Persuade. It's going to be pathane. Good, but then we do need to change this to a grave accent, because this is followed by a non-enclitic of regular de. So here's our example then, and we can see how men and de are working in opposition. It is easy to speak, but it's difficult to persuade. Let's try this in the opposite direction now, going from a Greek example into an English one. See if you can spot it, see if you can see where we're going. Ho men poetes graphe. Yeah. It's funny how watching the brain malfunction on video, isn't it? Ho men poetes graphe. Ho de, you can see the opposition building. Krites paideoe. So it's good for all language instructors, wherever they may be, justifying our existence not to be poets who actually contribute new beautiful things to society. It takes Plato and others to say, well, actually, you know, the philosopher, the critic, the person thinking about, they're creating their own beautiful things too, even if what the poet's creating is maybe more beautiful and we all wanted to be poets. But let's go. So on the one hand, poet writes. So all we need to write here ourselves, we don't need to include that on the one hand, but we know it's there in our mind, right? On the one hand, the poet writes, but on the other hand, the critic, the judge, educates. The poet writes, but the critic educates. So men de here is saying, well, two things. The poet and the critic are different, and they do different things. These are non-equivalents. Well, they're equivalent sorts of things. These are both nouns. These both also happen to be feminine or masculine first declension nouns, but that's neither here nor there. The poet is writing, and the critic is, well, let's just imagine if this men weren't here. That's an interesting question. The poet writes, and the critic teaches. Oh, all right, well, that's good, and that basically conveys the same meaning. But if we include this men, we're setting up that this is a little bit bigger than just a statement of fact. We're saying that there's an opposition here, and Greeks loved that opposition. Let me tell you, we'll see more of it as we go on. I like that going Greek first and then to English, so let's do that for Shelmerdine's third example. Well, actually, let's skip these examples. She's going through nouns, adjectives, verbs. We can do all that. Let's see how we can put this into more action. So let's now go from English into Greek. So some soldiers, this is going to be a new feature of men and de, were pursuing the enemy or whoever it is, and others were fleeing. Well, this is a special use of men and de, and this is with kind of the article, we might say, or with a class of something. So let's do the Greek, and we'll be able to kind of make sense of what I mean by that. So we have hoi, men, because we had to have that men. Stratiotai, this is the men and de episode after all. And then what's that? Pursuing, were pursuing, so that's going to be a nice imperfect third person plural. The soldiers were pursuing on the one hand, but on the other, so we're going to need to have another word, hoi, and then now our postpositive can come in, hoi de epheogon, were fleeing. Good, so we have two different, we have hoi men stratiotai, and then we have hoi de epheogon. Well, what's here? What's our nominative masculine plural thing? Well, this is a situation of Greeks, or the Greek language gapping, where if it's clear that we're talking about soldiers up here and we don't add anything here, we're clearly still talking about stratiotai. And then what this hoi and men are doing is not saying, on the one hand, the soldiers were fleeing, on the one hand, they were pursuing. No, what it's doing here is dividing. So we've got a soldier pile. Who knows where that dividing line is, but we're saying men, hoi men on this side are doing one thing, and hoi de on this side are doing another thing. It's not 50-50 necessarily, but it is some and some and others. That's exactly what the English sentence was, and that's done in Greek with men and de. Hoi men stratiotai ediokon, hoi de epheogon. Good. And then also times this contrast means that we don't even need a noun at all. So we had, well, just like, we can have hoi kakoi, and we mean the bad men. Well, if we do hoi men, different kind of men, and then hoi de, we're really just getting some men or people do it one way, and then some men or people do it another way. That's all that we're saying here. So but I said men, but there's no reason to be so gender biased about it. Let's take Shelmerdine's example. This is middle of page 43. Hi, men, Andrei. Again, that's a circumflex because that's a short diphthong ending. Hi, de. Ooh, isn't this interesting? So, a couple things going on. When ooh ends a sentence, and it just basically means not, it takes this accent. It's like an enclitic. It's at the end, and it gets it. Otherwise, it's just a proclitic. This is just a special thing of ooh at the end of sentence. So, ooh, when sentence final, acute accent. Well, that's fine. So what does this mean? So the feminine nominative plural things, on the one hand, courageous are, And then we don't get a noun here. It would be one thing if we said theai, and then we'd say, oh, well, clearly we're talking about goddesses. But if we don't have that, we're just assuming women, human women. The women are brave, and it's funny that this word really means manly, because manly virtue is what was going on. And that's also funny in Latin virtus, or virtus, comes from the same stem as vir, man. So manly virtue in both languages. We could feel very differently today about that, but that's how the Greeks thought. So the women were, maybe to the Greek mind, uncharacteristically courageous. Some of them, hymen, haide, others were not. So that's how we'd want to translate this. Some women are, present tense for the Greeks, at least. And I mean, we don't have any verb here. We have nothing to go on. So we have to assume here estin, right? Some kind of third person, or well, I guess asin, third person plural, but that's not here, neither here nor there. Tense will be clear from the context. Some women are courageous, others are not. So in English, we can do that without a connection. We could do, on the one hand, some women are courageous, but on the other hand, others are not. But that's so overly laborious. We don't need to go there. Some women are courageous, others are not. That's a nice way of getting at the Greek brevity, right? Because that's one of the beautiful things about Greek, is that it can express these things so condensedly. Let's not ruin it. Even though this men and de are setting up an opposition that in English we don't have a particle or some way to do that, really the best way that we can mimic this opposition in English is to do nothing here. Leave this blank and take a pause and say some women are courageous, others are not. A but here might even kind of ruin the idea. Good. Well, we have covered men and de now. Let's review a little bit. They are both what? They are both postpositive conjunctions. So we have de meaning and or but, and men meaning kind of on the one hand, but really we rarely need to translate it. I've come up with my own shorthand, OTOH on the one hand, and I will always bracket that because it's nice to understand, it's bad to translate. I guess that's really where I want to take this. And we're going to be seeing a lot of particles that are that way in Greek, where you, to understand what they are saying, need to know what it means and know that it means approximately this, but not as heavily, and it's not worth translating in something that's going to be read by others. With the exception of your professor, you can always write on the one hand, and the professor will probably appreciate that, because that way she or he will know that you understand what that means and that you're not just leaving it out because you've forgotten, oh, what does men mean again? So for our purposes, OTOH bracketed will do the job. It is easy to speak, but difficult to persuade. That was our first example. Veradion men esti legain. So we set up this men on the one hand against the difficulty of, so the easy versus the difficult, and then the speaking versus the persuading. These are held in opposition by men and de. And then we had similar examples here of various sorts, knowing that it could pair with a lot of things. Then finally, and this was very significant, hoi men and hoide started breaking, they would create an opposition between two parts of a whole, and then we would have some translate that. And we could do this with nouns that were expressed like soldiers, hois men stratiotai, and then hoi de, gapping it here because it was understood. We could also do it without a noun at all, just hoi men and then hoi de, or even hi men and hi de. Or I could say it now, why not? Let's make it neuter, ha men, or sorry, ta men, not quite to that ha yet, ta men, ta de. The stones are the gifts on the one hand, or some gifts on the one hand, but then this really would mean some things. because we're not being specific. We're not saying dora or whatever. But you'll really see it with hi and hoi the most, as we saw here. Hi men Andrea, some women are courageous, others are not. And note that when oo ends a sentence, it gains an acute accent. All right, just over 20. Really got to cut down, but you're all angels for listening to me prattle on for so long. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time. Take care. We'll do examples next time. That's always a good thing. Take care.